Okay, we are live right now, and we had a very good topic and episodes on last week with Professor Kaal. And just a short thing on our previous episode on where the progression, yeah, we discussed about the progression of Web 1 to Web 3, and then the problems of Web 2 as a centralized platform. However, it gave the way for the consumers to share what they have in the marketplace in the internet. However, this is a bottleneck. This was discussed. The Facebook, the YouTubes, and all those platforms wherein the users are giving their data for free. Now, an environment of work to earn where users are rewarded for the value they provided, governed by anonymous and autonomous communities, is the next step for democratization and for Web3. This nonetheless poses several nuances, though our topic for today is basically the future of decentralization. So, welcome to the block and stay tuned because you will be in for a treat. Now, our guest for today needs no further introduction. He's a leading expert at the intersection of law, business, and technology with a focus on emerging technologies applications in broad arrays of industry, decentralized infrastructures, digital assets, DAOs, NFTs, and smart contracting, as well as private investment fund regulation and compliance. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Professor Wulf Kaal.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure always, Professor. Thanks for being here. And we're going to talk about the future of decentralization. And here with me also is my co host, Professor Yodo.
Hi guys, thank you for having me here. Best wishes to you.
Now, Professor Kao, the last episode was basically amazing where we talk about the platforms Web 1, Web 3, and Earn to Work, and the different nuances also in the transition of people going from Web 2 and Web 3. Now, right now, we'll go to the future of decentralization. What is the future of decentralization? How do you see it?
Okay, so very broad topic, obviously, and there's intelligent minds beg to differ on what the future may hold. But we can see in 2022 that there's certain I would almost call them inevitabilities in terms of the technology infrastructure we're seeing. And those revolve around things like reputation systems that certain governments have started using. And I'll talk about this gladly in a little bit. But also just basic uses of the internet, IoT, for instance. Yeah, so Internet of Things. I think we all can agree that in the future, the washing machine will talk in some form or fashion to the fridge and the coffee maker and the garbage disposal and all these other systems that people use constantly, right? So, and it's hard to really understand how far the IoT environment will go, right? So the existence of sensors, smart lighting, Philips does enormous cutting edge work here, Philips lighting. What that does for people's emotions, all these things, right? And where we plug sensors, wearables, people in Sweden have started, and I'm just giving you some examples, have started inserting chips under their skin in their hands as a way to use the train system, etc. So we only just start seeing this, and all of these devices at some point have to interact with each other. So the question becomes, all these devices will share information to work together efficiently, right? So when you walk into the bathroom, there will be a different lighting system because you're wearing wearables, and the wearables that you're wearing have to signal to the lighting system in the bathroom that you want a different light, et cetera, right? The floor gets heated differently. All these things are happening, right? So Bill Gates has built his whole house around this. You may know that he has a whole house that where he experiments with all of these systems. The question is, who controls all that data? That's a very, very big question, right? Are we really going to let a centralized server coordinate this? I find that extremely difficult to imagine that that's what's going to happen. And I may be wrong, okay? I want to be really clear. It may be that another Facebook and Google shows up and that everybody sells out to them. Sorry, you can hear the negative undertone in the way I'm talking about this, right? So I find that extremely difficult to imagine that will happen. I find it more likely to think that people will try to control their own data. And so there's a whole data access and data rights movement. I think that came with the CryptoPunks and is still ongoing today. It's not mainstream, but that's something that is, when we talk about the future of decentralization, that's extremely important in this context, right? These systems, however, you cannot control your own data if you don't have decentralized infrastructure to control your data, because otherwise you're always ending up with somebody on the other side in a centralized server environment who controls that data. Yeah. So there's that whole component of it. But then this idea of these devices, the IoT infrastructure. So we're talking about smart contracts providing efficient regulatory mechanisms and link processes and supply chains here, right? So this is from the root of the potato farmer or the orange farmer, picking up the produce and putting it into the supply chain, right? All these systems right now are governed by some form of centralized control mechanisms that fail because the verification systems are centralized, right? You can still do a lot of these things with centralized systems, but they're not optimal, right? So what we, in my opinion, will likely see is that the IoT infrastructure will be governed in some form of decentralized infrastructure mechanism that coordinates how the data between devices is shared and who controls that data. I find it extremely difficult to imagine that this will be done in centralized fashion, right? And we all know the internet has certain bottlenecks that we're dealing with. So there's a lot of data. Cisco has provided a lot of data on certain limits that the internet in the current infrastructure experiences. So if you imagine those IoT devices going on the existing infrastructure with the internet, and we're talking about billions of devices that need to be coordinated through wireless and other internet environments, it's going to get very hairy, right? So we're talking about some of the fundamental infrastructure data layers. And again, I find it extremely difficult to imagine that they won't be decentralized. So when we talk about the future of decentralization, to me, that is one point where we need to really start doing the research and provide solutions. I mean, Cisco and other companies are doing that, but they're doing it with a profit motive in a rent-seeking environment. I don't know if in my world, you cannot run businesses that way. You have to be open source. You have to share. You have to build on other people's work in order to build that infrastructure. Now, there may be, it's happened for over 200 years. There may be a centralized behemoth that will seduce, for lack of a better word, consumers into doing this. I just can't imagine right now, and I'm biased because I'm on the decentralization infrastructure side, I cannot imagine that this would be possible for the future of IoT in the future of the internet. And we can talk about what Web3 means here. And there are different opinions on this, of course. But yeah, so what's most important here is that the data has to be accessed and shared. And we don't have that level of data right now on the internet. So if you imagine billions of devices talking to each other and needing some form of internet exchange mechanism, the question becomes how do you authenticate when the for very simple example, when the washing machine needs to talk to the fridge. You can right now run this through a centralized hub that is coordinated. But if you take this to the next level, where all of these devices in the orbit, satellites, all of this, they're constantly connected, it's very difficult to imagine that this would be coordinated through centralized hubs. I'll leave it there,
Yeah.
unless you want to ask some more
Yeah,
questions.
I want to ask something because this is kind like you said, you cannot imagine this. This for me, this is scary when we go that path wherein your IoT devices are controlled by centralized authorities. And I'm imagining that, we're heading towards the Terminator movie wherein we
That's
don't,
exactly right.
yeah,
That's yeah.
we are heading that way. One project that I was looking at and is I don't know if you heard about the Helium project, the HNT token, wherein they use those IoT device for LoRaWAN, and at the same time they would tokenize those who would provide services for um, uh, being a host on their platform. So basically, they're doing the IoT blockchain, and the decision is based on basically on the community. But moving forward, um you're talking about also the fourth industrial revolution, and it's getting really fast. IoT, AI,
Yeah. So
blockchain, that's where it's heading. What would be the role of AI compared to having it in a blockchain?
Um, so Vince, I don't want to get political, but when you use the word fourth industrial revolution, you know who controls that, right?
Right.
That
I'm
entire
sorry.
dialogue is controlled by certain people,
Uh-huh.
and let's just say, they're not building this in a decentralized infrastructure where the people control this thing, right? So I just want to, that's how I look at this. Yeah, sorry, keep going.
No, though that's one of their topics is blockchain. Anyway, Yodo, you want to add or you want to ask?
Yeah, I really like your answer because of this fourth, or to the fourth, whatever revolution. I see it that way that most of these, let's say, views of what to come are far from the effective solution of issues. At the moment, it's because of this very centralized and monopolistic way or view that all the fridges and all the toasters, whatever, have to be connected to the internet and have to talk to some
That's right.
server in services. But this is not completely insmart because it's absolutely sufficient if those fridges, toasters, and whatever are talking to themselves, belonging to a household. So it's massively decentralization.
That's right.
As a consultant, I usually work as a consultant as well. So one of my practical encounters, let's say, was um, a farmer having issues getting 5G outside in a mobile milking chamber, and was, oh, I can't do this without 5G. So the issue basically is it's absolutely not needed to have a 5G there because the milking machine just has to read the cows. And a really slow line would be totally sufficient to transfer the data, how many milk went where, and which cow is what and has to be fed what, and even maybe which medicament has to be added. So I see this all has to be 5G, the biggest internet, the biggest speed, and all has to be connected together, is the most smart thought in these memes. And it's basically, as you mentioned, will block this even, because if everybody and anything is talking to each other, there will be no possible network fulfilling that.
Yeah.
So,
And so we're talking about multiple networks in which you're seamlessly moving with data exchanges, right? That's the future. And there are already blockchain companies that are building some of this. I'm not endorsing any of that, of course, but we can see this happening. But there's also a very big piece that we haven't talked about yet in all of this is regulation, right? Now, in a prior life, I consider myself a recovering attorney. I still teach it. It does hold you back in terms of innovating, though, right? Because there's this regulatory environment in which we have to comply. And a lot of this also affects the way we can build the future of decentralized systems and IoT and all the things that we know are coming. So one way that we really have to look at the future of decentralization, which is what we're talking about, is how do you continue to upgrade the regulatory environment, right? So there is, on the one hand, blockchains are literally enabling the regulator to see everything, right? Everything. So sunlight is the best disinfectant, right? You can set up all these systems and say, look, everything we do is public, right? You may not have the infrastructure to see it all, but it's all on the chain. Here it is. You can take it, you can evaluate it. Right now, the regulator, of course, is overwhelmed with all the data that comes out of that. But that's just one piece. So you have that piece, that infrastructure piece that comes out of this technology, right? Which can be directly used for upgrading regulatory systems, where you literally give the regulator more information. You give them all information constantly. How they evaluate that is a different story, but that's not what we're having right now. Right now, we have a situation where the regulator is saying, hey, you need to disclose. We don't know what you're doing, and we are requesting these disclosures. So if you look at the amount of regulation that pertains to disclosures, it's quite staggering, right? And there's been studies on this that show it's a linearly and sometimes exponential curve, right? In terms of the rules that require a disclosure. So with this technology, we have the ability to upgrade regulation for the future of Web3 in itself. So that's a huge component of the future of decentralization. Now, some crypto anarchists may argue that none of it should exist, right? And we can discuss this, right? We can discuss where the lines are. But one thing that we haven't done yet in this entire debate is this, it's dear to me because I've written many articles about this idea of in real time upgrading regulatory information, which just doesn't exist really at this point. Yeah. So how do you create a regulatory infrastructure that upgrades given rules that may apply, let's say, to devices that are constantly changing and just constantly upgrading, constantly creating new devices that the regulators cannot know. So somebody has to create rules that pertain to these devices, right? And we have not started thinking about this in dynamical systems in a regulatory environment, right? So as these systems are becoming live, I don't want to use the word conscious here, but it's close, right? And the exchange of data between them is accelerating exponentially. More systems get online. We currently don't have a system that creates a backstop for this, other than our outdated, centralized. Congress has said, and Congress has protected the consumers. Congress, if you're working in an exponential environment of innovation, Congress cannot realistically protect the consumers at that point. Yeah, and we're only starting right now to see where this is going in terms of the amount of innovation and data that's generated. So so the question then becomes, if in the future of decentralization, Congress and other centralized systems cannot fulfill those roles that we created them for, among others, what is going to replace them? So when we talk about the future of decentralization, that is another big component of what decentralized infrastructure systems have to do. You have to be able, as all of this proliferates and we're dealing with exponential levels of innovation, you have to create systems that are decentralized, real-time upgrades to the existing consumer protection environments. Yeah, and I don't even see debates about this. There's nobody who sees this coming. Now, us talking here, because that's what we do, we build decentralized infrastructure, we know that this is coming. This is inevitable, right? But if anybody who's watched the Facebook congressional hearings knows where we're at right now, right? So this is extremely important. So we're talking about decentralized, dynamic, evolutionary systems of governance that have to be built into the decentralized infrastructure to protect all the parties that are participating in this, which is everybody, really. Yeah. So, and it's very hard to get people to think that way. So I've been working on this for over a decade, and I'm biased, and I see it coming, but we're still in our infancy, and that's why Congress and others are not starting to think about this. The problem is that the innovation is so exponential that if we don't start thinking about these protective mechanisms and layers of dynamic evolutionary governance, it's very risky. Yeah. So Elon Musk has come out and talked about AI in this context. And I don't want to regurgitate all of this. And warned about AI in this context. And we have AI ethics now in other fields. But we are not talking about dynamical evolutionary governance in any form. And how are we dealing with any of these systems that we know are being used, are decentralized, and they plug AI, and the exponential rates are increasing? You see what I'm saying? We need to build these systems. And so this goes back to something that's near and dear to my heart, which is, can you teach AI to dynamically govern other AI? It's a big question mark, right? Because that's how we think right now. We think, oh, AI is doing all these things, and we're going to use the same as humans to control it. Really?
One thing that I'll be asking you, go ahead, before you go, Professor Johannes, is the other thing is we talk about the regulators. Do you think the regulators right now would let go of their power in accepting decentralization?
So, okay, so there is the regulators letting go, which is very unlikely, right? We've never seen this that I'm aware of. But the bigger question becomes, as you see these failures, and these failures are very dangerous, right? If and when you start seeing regulatory failures, and the consuming public screaming for protections, what are the regulators going to do? Pass more laws? Shut the internet down? So at some point, if we don't build these systems ourselves to protect the humans, it's irrelevant what the regulator does at that point. They will be late anyways to the game, right? Because they're always just following tech trends, right? And a lot of people say, oh no, look how we regulated the internet. We did a few tweaks here and there, and it's fine, right? And we can adjust our precedent and case law, and we'll work this out. Well, you did that in linear growth environments, not in exponential growth of innovation, right? So these are totally different environments. And when we add AI to this, right, the way we need to think about this is dynamic, because innovation is dynamic and evolutionary, and so has to be consumer protection. So going back to this question, can AI be taught to control AI? I'm not an AI person. I have some very serious concerns about that. with that, I think we need a human backstop mechanism that is decentralized governance, and that's what I care about. Also, and that's what I'm building. And the way we have to build these human backstops is in a decentralized governance environment where you use the expertise from people around the world in a DAO environment to create dynamical governance solutions. I know this is a lot right now, but there's no, in my opinion, there's no way around something like that, where humans use technology and decentralized infrastructure to create solutions for the future of human engagement with future innovation and future AI involvement. Yeah. So there are many people who are business ethicists and who are now talking about AI related regulatory solutions. I have not seen these dynamical, decentralized human backstop conversations. I may have missed something, but this is very, very important. And let me transition this just quickly. So when we talk about reputation systems and human backstops to smart contracting and dynamical evolutionary governance, a lot of people go back into Orwellian nightmares, right? Where they're saying, "Oh, you cannot do this. Look at what the Chinese have done." Okay, so Western society is reluctant to reputational systems. Despite this, many reputational systems already exist, such as in China, right? So China's Communist Party has used social credit scores, which determines the eligibility to social benefits based on social behavior, right? So you have travel privileges if your social credit score is at X point, right? If you're buying the right milk, you're throwing the trash away, and you're feeding yourself XYZ products, that all goes into, so considered desirable behavior, that all goes into your social credit score, right? And of course, if you do something that's off the charts, as determined by a centralized authority on what is good behavior versus bad behavior, if you do bad things, you get penalized, right? So that's why a lot of people really look at this and say, "Whoa, humans have done this before, and it's terrible. It subdues people and restricts them and forces them into compliance and all these things, right?" So these social credit scores that the Chinese are doing, they're fueled with distrust in fellow citizens, right? And this is really Hobbes, right? Homo homini lupus, that the man is wolf to the man, where humans are using these systems to control each other, okay? Which is the exact antithesis of what we're talking about here. And I can contrast this further. Let me, go ahead. Vince.
No, I mentioned dog eat dog world, wherein they use this kind of scoring to take advantage of other people in China, the social credit score.
Yeah.
Go ahead, please.
So what we are talking about is not what the Chinese have done, and not what centralized authoritarian regimes do to their citizens to control outcomes and optimize output, okay? And how people abuse each other in that system. What we're talking about is the exact antithesis of that, right? So in social credit score systems, you only have one token. In Web3 reputation systems that are decentralized, you have many types of reputation tokens. And people control where and how they engage to get these tokens, right? So if you only have one token that centralizes everything around it, and people are forced to build these scores with one token, of course it's going to go bad. Okay, you need to create choice, right? I mean, look at the bad example, right? Communist party in West Germany. How many genes types did exist in those days in East Germany? I think they had 3 or 4 types of genes that was centralized produced, right? That's not what people want. People, so in open societies, we see much more proliferation of different kinds of consumer goods, et cetera, right? It's similar and comparable in the Web3 reputation systems. You need to give people what they want, what they're good at, right? So you need to give them tokens to engage in communities which they care about. And by the way, that can also become a faith component. That I'm currently working on a book where I'm talking about how people relate in these new communities, in these new Web3 communities, and how faith is, Bitcoin is a religion to some people, right? So I'm talking about how this engagement and how they relate with each other, and this meaningful, and the values that come out of this, and the values that people share, who share the same tokens, that can often become a quasi faith, like people who do yoga, people who engage in certain communities, they share similar values. And you see the same happening in Web3 reputation systems. Okay, so let me go back. So Communist Party, social credit scores, one token everybody's forced into and measured. Web3 reputation systems, we measure, but it's open. It's completely open as to where and how you engage and what tokens you accumulate. Yeah, it's up to the consumer, up to the people who are engaging in this. Yeah? In the social credit score environment, we have closed membership, where the Communist Party determines who gets in and who is afflicted with the score of one token. Okay, in what we are building in Web3 reputation systems, it's open membership. Anybody who qualifies and wants in and does XYZ can be part of this and grow reputation scores in different kinds of communities if they so choose and if they engage. But it's their choice. It's not forced membership with a score, right? It's choice. And if you stop engaging in one community with a reputation score and you move to another, it's also your choice. Now, you've worked hard for this first score, so maybe you want to keep doing that because you may get other benefits that come from that. Including payment, certain debts, right? It's choice, okay? So it's the antithesis of what we see humans have built with social credit scores. Next item is privacy. In the Communist Party social credit score environment, there is no privacy, right? Everything is controlled and reported. Whereas in the Web3 environments, where people choose to engage, they also can choose, ideally, to stay anonymous, to disclose where they're members, not disclose it. And this level of anonymity is something we actually haven't created, to my knowledge, ever in the history of humanity. So we don't even know how people engage if they're anonymous. Now, if they are anonymous, it's very important that you create a governance system that allows people who are anonymous, who are not controlled by other factors that throughout history humans had to comply with, right? So if you're anonymous in these webs, I mean, if you're judging by Reddit and other systems where you're quasi-anonymous, that often brings out the worst in people, right? So when we're creating this, to preserve privacy, you also need to give people a regulatory tool set to let them behave in a community in a proper way, right? And so it's about incentives. And by the way, I've written a book about, that's what the book is about, right? How do you create that tool set? Yeah. Okay, so let me get to the next point, and then I want to make sure I answer more questions. So in the social credit scores, the centralized governance, where they control everything, how, when, where, how people engage, right? In Web3 reputation systems, it's decentralized governance. And that is just really, really important to understand, right? So to summarize quickly, we have Web3 reputation systems that are many types of reputation tokens, very diverse, open membership, people have choice, we have privacy, and ideally full anonymization. Depends on how the system, what the community in a given environment chooses, whether they do choose full anonymity or not. And lastly, we have decentralized governance, right? So again, it's a complete antithesis to what we've seen. And these systems are important for regulation, for IoT, and for the future of decentralization. They are literally the core of the infrastructure that we build for decentralized systems. I'll stop here.
Yodo, you do have a question?
At the moment, not really. Maybe a decentralization of personalization. And this means not real complete anonymity. Like if you write anonymous articles, more than one, it's usual that people will recognize there is one, not knowing whom, but there will be some kind of personalization in these means. And different platforms will have the same guy doing different stuff, and there's another distributed, let's say,
I mean, it's things
decentralized
like
thing.
the way you spell things, right? The way people use orthographical mistakes, the way they enunciate things. It's all traceable. I totally agree, right? So we haven't really figured out how you actually ultimately anonymize, right? And you can't control whether people surrender their anonymity, even if you could completely anonymize it, right? So now using AI, that's just one way to help optimize anonymization, right? But then only with the perspective of creating an actual functional human backstop, right? And then the problem, of course, then again is if humans cannot actually anonymize because we're too unique in the mistakes we make, etc. Should we be using AI to anonymize? That's a big topic that I'm happy to talk about. And those are the types of conversations we have to have. That's what pushes humanity forward. That's what gets us to the next iteration, and it will take for 10, 20 years. I hope I'm still around to see some of this happen, and these systems being built. And I'm working hard to help this evolution.
Yodo?
Yes, so we do. Just one thing, I think the word artificial intelligence, AI, not really happened until now. It's expert systems, it's good statistics and adoptable statistics, but for my perception of, I would really tell AI, we haven't reached that state so far. I do understand that it's really perceptible to presume something intelligent behind some complex behavior.
Thank you for that correction. You're absolutely right. We are still in the hinterland for a lot of this, and I use the word in the expectation that it will at some point exist, but we are moving towards that. Absolutely correct. Sorry. Yeah.
No, don't need to be sorry. It's just my perception of it, and I think the major issue with that is that people too fast assume intelligence behind technical straight systems. I've seen it in many arts expeditions and so on. It really was interesting, and building my knowledge in these means what people may think what is intelligent or not.
Yeah.
Anyway, this has been a very great conversation, and I've learned a lot. The future of decentralization. Just looking at it, if we talk about decentralization's future, humanity's future is going to be bright. Without decentralization, I think it would be more catastrophic, especially with the regulations that are going on. And people got to wake up and know and learn about about decentralization. And I thank you, Professor Wulf Kaal, for dissecting everything in terms of what the future of decentralization is, but basically what it will be its use. and you have been a proponent of this. I'll give you the whole floor to say your final thoughts and invite people for your book.
Yeah, thank you. So, future of the decentralization is bright, and it shines bright for humanity. And I invite people to join and try to participate in it. There are different ways to do that. You can join a DAO community. You can listen to podcasts. I keep always telling my students it's extremely important to follow these trends and to make sure that people have a second leg to stand on, or third leg, whatever you want to call it. Because if you don't have exposure and you haven't started thinking about it, it can sometimes be a little late to get involved, right? So the more you know, the more you see where things are going. And crypto and these environments do it by themselves. But involvement is important, and building knowledge base, because these systems are different, and we need to retrain ourselves. And I retrain myself every day to stop thinking in these centralized systems and try to think about where is decentralized taking us, and what does it take on an individual level to contribute to it and adjust to it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My question, I am supposed to ask this, but I'm going to ask this next time. How many years would it take for acceptance of decentralization in terms of the in governance using decentralization? Because that would be, I don't know. And I would like to ask you that on our next conversation. Maybe you could give a sneak peek.
Yeah, I deal with that every day. Very happy to talk about it next week.
Thank you so much. And for those who are watching right now, for the viewers, all you have to do is, I have the QR code right here on my upper right. Just scan it, and you could go directly to Amazon, where you could purchase the book of Professor Wulf Kaal.
Yeah,
Thank
I'm
you
sorry.
So much.
Apparently, the book is almost sold out, so there may be a little bit of a delay for the reprint, but it's coming.
Thank you. And Professor Yodo, God bless you all. See you on our next episode.
Thank you all. See you
next week. Thanks for your questions.
This blockchain continuing education program is brought to you by our major sponsors: HTML Coin, Utility Coin Beyond the Hype; Altash University, your online school in the fourth industrial revolution; Libra Codes, take control on your NFT creation; and Credence Hub, verified credentials, anytime, anywhere. We also